Hello, welcome. This is Jennifer. I'm glad you're here. I apologize for not having a regular pre-recorded video in some time. Things are a little hectic here with my son's graduation, but I have a video for you today, and I have a few more coming out soon. Now in this video, I am focusing on my new favorite type of product because it is one that you can use in many different ways, and I'm demonstrating that today. This is press plates. Now press plates are meant to be used with the better press, but you can also foil with them and make an impression with them. And so many variations of each of those. So I'm going to walk you through lots of those ideas today so you really can make the most of this type of product. However, I will talk along the way about other products you can use so you can use some things that you have in your stash. By the way, stick around to the end of this video or look in the description below for a great, very generous free gift offer from Pinkfresh. It's worth checking out. Let's get started with this card. I'm actually going to begin with the background, which isn't about press plates. Stay tuned, I'll get into that discussion in a moment. This background is done with layering stencils, believe it or not, and it gives a really cool look. So I will be using the new Pinkfresh Studios overlapping geometric stencil set. There are 6 stencils in the set. You could use all 6 or just a few of them, totally up to you. It'll give different looks. I'll be using all 6 today for a really fun layered look. I'm starting with one of the stencils and just taping it onto a piece of white cardstock, and I'll put little tick marks on the corners so I know where to line up each of the stencils each time. There are many ways you can do this. This is just what made sense to me at the time. Now these are big openings on these stencils, so if you wanted to, you could do some fun techniques, maybe stamp over the openings or use another stencil over the opening and then get a really cool overlapping kind of pattern background. But I'm using them in a very simple way today. I am just applying ink over the opening. I'm using Pinkfresh dye inks here. This is the cherry blossom color. It's a beautiful, soft, peachish pink color. And I'm applying this lightly over the opening. You could do like an ombre where you go from dark to light. You could mix different colors, whatever you want. But again, I'm going simple. Now it may look like my blending is a bit splotchy here, but Pinkfresh Studio inks are very good about smoothing out as they dry. They're very forgiving for ink blending and for using with stencils. Highly recommend them. I always say they're kind of like a happy jelly bean color collection, and you see me use them a lot in videos. However, these stencils can be done with whatever inks that you may have. Now over the second stencil, I started with yellow ink. I thought I wanted yellow in my background, but I changed my mind and I went in over that with Sunkissed, which is more of an orange color. And I'm sticking with kind of oranges, peaches, and pinks for this background. Now you definitely could go a little more bold with the different colors you use on these, but you want to keep in mind that the colors will overlap, creating new colors. This is also a really fun way to experiment with your colors and see what different colors you can overlap to create new ones. One of the best ways to make the most of fewer ink colors in your collection is to try overlapping them. So I will continue to use all the different stencils here. You can see the openings are a little bit different on each. So again, you don't need to layer them all, but wait till you see what it looks like when you do layer them all. After you've done all of your layering, if you feel like there are any areas that feel a little too bold, you can put white pigment ink blended over one of those stencils and it would kind of soften that area. So that's another way you can really stretch these stencils. But here's what I came up with layering those peaches and pinks. I'm crazy about this and I like that there's that kind of light focal point over there on the top left. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about my new favorite type of product, and that is press plates. Now, press plates were started really by Spellbinders to go with their better press system, which you'll see me use later. When they came up with this new system, they reached out to other companies and suggested they create designs also that work with the better press. Pinkfresh Studios is one that's doing this and has some great designs for press plates. Now, press plates are really intended to be used with the Spellbinders Better Press system. Again, I'll show you that later. But I have done a lot of playing around with them and found that they can be used for much more. And really have 3 different ways that I really like to use them. And I'm going to show those all today. So the 3 different ways to use press plates is first for faux letterpress, and that's using the Better Press system. The second is for foiling, using a foiling machine. These press plates foil beautifully. And third is to make an impression. With this technique, you don't need anything besides a die cut machine and basic supplies you probably have. And all three give very different, amazing results with press plates. I will demonstrate all three several times throughout this video, but keep in mind I've done a lot of these techniques in live videos that I've done in the recent past. I'll link to several of those below if you're looking for more ideas and inspiration. Now on this first card, I'll use a press plate to foil. Now this is the new Pinkfresh Never Give Up collection. All of these parts are sold separately so you can pick and choose what you might be interested in. Here's this stamp set that has a beautiful floral image and sentiments. I like that the coordinating die set really cuts those sentiments out nice and tight. Really, Pinkfresh does a really good job of that, so it's easy to add to a card. Now there's also the press plate. That's right here. It can be used for the three techniques I mentioned and many more. We're going to use it to foil on this card. And then there are the layering stencils that can be used to color in the stamped image or the press plate image. I really like having all these different options. Now I'm going to foil with this press plate. So I'm using a cardstock that I find foolproof with foiling, and that is Hammermill smooth cardstock. Now any smooth cardstock will work. Really you can use any cardstock you have, but if you want foolproof foiling, a smooth cardstock like this one is a great option. I am taping my press plate to the top of the cardstock to create a little hinge. I'll lift up the press plate and slide in some foil. This is a iridescent gold foil that I really find foils beautifully. I'll trim off the excess and then place this onto our Glimmer foil machine. You want to make sure, by the way, that the pretty side of the press plate touches the pretty side of the foil. So this is the Glimmer foil machine. I have it warmed up. It's ready to be used. I place that all onto the warmed up portion, put the plates on top, and then press the timer button. Once the timer button has gone through the cycle completely, it doesn't take very long, I'll take all of the plates out and run them through my die cut machine. This is the Spellbinders die cut machine. So the Glimmer machine applies the heat, the die cut machine applies the pressure. And then when you remove this, you get a beautiful foiled image. It's really gorgeous, and I actually find press plates foil even better than foil plates in almost all circumstances. It's something about those press plates. And while I'm here, I'll go ahead and do a couple more. I like to have extra foiled images on hand. While I've got my machine hot and going, I might as well make a few extras. Now, something to keep in mind is that leftover foil that you peel off, you can put to good use. I'll do that foiling now, and I will show you how I incorporate it into a card later in this video. To use the leftover foil, I like to use the Pinkfresh solid foil plate. I put that onto my Glimmer machine, which is warmed up and ready again. I put the leftover foil face down on it, and then a piece of cardstock on top of that. I'll put the plates on top, push the timer button, and after the timer's done, I give it like another minute because this is a lot of foil to transfer. Then I take all of those plates out of my Glimmer machine, run them through my die cut machine to apply that pressure, and watch this. You peel that off and look at that. You have your leftover foil used and ready for a card. Then you can use the coordinating die to cut each of those out. I will be using the regular foil image on the left for this card and saving the solid one for a card later in this video. Now I have my Altenew sticky mat here that's just holding that die cut in place and my stencil in place as I add color on top. Now normally when I apply ink over these coloring stencils, I try to fill in the area with bold color because I really appreciate bold colors on my cards. However, my background is very bold on this card, so I am doing super light inking over the stencils so that this floral image will be very light in the end. So I'm using a small blending brush to apply a very light amount of ink, more towards the center of each of these openings. So these flowers, the petals will actually be white on the outside with a bit of light color towards the inside edges. I did use the new Altenew micro blending brushes. I'll show you a closer look here in a moment. I really like these tiny tip brushes. The bristles are short, which allows you to have a little more control, and they are tiny to get into those little floral openings. Now I am using a few different colors of Pinkfresh inks that match the ones I used on the background. In fact, I think I used all of the same colors that I used on the background, just a much lighter application. So I'm going through these. I'm not taking much time to blend because remember what I mentioned, Pinkfresh Studio inks are really good about blending as they dry. So you don't need to take much time to get good results. And you'll see more of that later in this video. Okay, so after I have applied a little bit of those pink and peaches to these layering stencils, I will do a soft green over the leaves. And again, I'm trying to keep my light inking very close to the center of the openings. That way the tips of my leaves and petals are white and look like kind of like a highlight on those tips. By the way, here's a closer look at those little micro brushes. So you can see how you can easily get into tiny areas and get nice blending. And by the way, if you've never done this where you use a very light amount of ink over coloring stencils, I encourage you to do so. It gives such a different result than using bold, full color over those same stencils. And here is a look at the final result. I really like that soft look, something that I forget to do, but it works great on this bold background. Now let's put this card together. I did create a thin gold frame using the Pinkfresh nested hexagon dies. I've used these a lot in videos. I just took 2 hexagon dies that are close in size and I cut it from gold cardstock to create that thin frame. There are a bunch of different size hexagons, so you can make any size frame you want. And I'm tucking my flower so it's behind the frame in some areas and above the frame in others, just so it kind of creates a card where all the elements are hooked together. Now I did decide at this point that I wanted to add something more to the background. So I'm using my Misty stamping tool and I'm stamping kind of on the 4 corners of the background using white pigment ink. This is a great way to add a little interest to the background but nothing too distracting. I really wanted it to be soft white, so while the ink was still wet, I just like to take a piece of scrap cardstock and press it over the image to remove a little bit of that ink and give me a nice softer result. You could also stamp with like a darker pink and get a tone-on-tone look that way. But there's something nice about that white ink on the bold backgrounds. And by the way, you could see I had to have my cardstock hang out of the Misty to do this little corner stamping, but it works just fine. And then I'll glue that onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. Now to adhere the frame and the flower, as I showed you before, I'm putting a piece of tape on the left-hand edge of the frame. I'm just taping it where I want it to end up on my card. Then I can start tucking in my flower, and once I have everything in position, I can add glue behind the frame and behind the flowers. I found this was easier than trying to kind of fiddle with the pieces not attached temporarily with that tape. So next time you try to get something arranged on your card, try adding a little temporary tape to hold some things in place as you work. All right, once I have everything where I want it, I can use my liquid adhesive in the fine tip bottle from Gina K Designs to squeeze a little bit of adhesive here and there behind the elements. That's one of the nice things about having a fine tip bottle like that. I'm also using the magnets that I have with my glass magnetic work surface that are going to hold these in place while I put some liquid adhesive behind the frame where that tape was. So magnets and heavy blocks like the clear one I have here are very helpful when putting cards together like this, and they'll hold them in place as your elements dry. I also like to take thin pieces of foam tape. I just cut those squares up into thinner pieces and tuck them under different elements. Here I'm tucking them behind some of the flower elements so that there's a bit of dimension. I usually take my craft knife and kind of pierce the side of the foam square or foam tape and then tuck that underneath the die cut. So it's pretty easy to add at this point. So everything is glued down now either with liquid adhesive or with foam tape. I'll give that some time to dry and then I can add my sentiment. I chose to use an older stamp set from Pinkfresh Studio. This is the Happy Vibes stamp set. Now, I've used this one a lot in videos and I use it a lot today. I really like the unique style of these. I stamped a few in black ink and used the coordinating die to cut them out because I wasn't sure which one I was going to use on my card. And I'll save those leftover sentiments with the stamp set so I can use them later on. After I added my stamp set, I couldn't decide if I wanted to trim off the flower hanging off the edge. If you want to leave it hanging off the edge, you could just put your card in a bigger envelope, like a 5x7 envelope. However, I decided to go ahead and trim my flowers off the edge so I could fit it into a regular A2 envelope. The only other thing I did off screen was add little gold gemstones to the center of the flowers. I felt like those gold gemstones went nicely with the gold frame and the gold foiling. Here you can also see that background that we created with those fun layering stencils and a bit of white stamping. So with this card, I show that you can use a press plate to do beautiful foolproof foiling. I really encourage you to try this. The foiling is top-notch each time. I'll be doing some more foiling with press plates later in this video. Okay, my next example shares using press plates to do the other two techniques. One, with the Better Press system for a faux letterpress look, and two, to create a deep impression using a die cut machine. Let's first do the faux letterpress using the Spellbinders Better Press system. Here's the Better Press system. I love this tool. I highly recommend it. It gives foolproof, crisp, great results every time. I am using this time the Better Press cotton paper, which works really well with it, but you could use whatever paper you have. I'll talk more about that later. And I'm placing this diagonal stripe Pinkfresh Studio press plate onto the gray magnetic surface of the Better Press system. Now this press plate here, this diagonal one, you'll see me do foiling and an impression later on, but here we're doing faux letterpress with the Better Press system. I'm inking up my press plate using Pinkfresh dye ink here. You could use a variety of inks for this. I find all of them work really well. I have my paper taped onto the clear plate that will go on top of the Better Press. Now, there are 4 magnets in the corners, so it just pops right in place. Then you take this and you run it through your die cut machine, and this will press that cardstock, that paper, onto the inked press plate and leave beautiful impression. I find that this is really foolproof. The way they design the system, it gives gorgeous results. It kind of leaves a bit of an impression in the cardstock, but it leaves very crisp inking. So it gives great results, even more crisp than you could get with stamping. All right, now I'm going to use my magnet to pick up that press plate and just rotate it. So I just rotate it one turn there and put it back onto the Better Press. Now I'm going to repeat the process using a slightly different color of purple ink, and this will give us a plaid. Now there are many ways you could do this. You could also just kind of shift it to get different stripes in the background. So many different things you can do, and I'll demonstrate a few later. But here I just turned it so that I have the stripes going in opposite direction, and we will run this through our die cut machine. So what happens is those 4 magnets kind of hold that clear plate where the paper is taped, kind of holds it over the inked up press plate, and it doesn't press it in until you go through the die cut machine. That way you get really good control. And look at that gorgeous result. So you can see here how it's kind of pressed in, leaving a bit of an indentation, but also leaving that ink behind. Now this is that cotton paper that Spellbinders recommends for the Better Press system. It really does do a good job, but I wanted to show you could also use other cardstock. Here I just have a piece of lilac colored cardstock. I believe this is from Spellbinders, and I'm doing the same process, same colors, same process with the same press plate, but showing you can get great results with regular cardstock too. I will say the impression isn't as noticeable when you're not using that cotton paper, but you still get the crisp result, much more crisp than you could get with stamping. Now, I intentionally didn't ink up the edge of the plate here. See how the color isn't transferred completely on the edge there? I did that intentionally so I could show you that if you miss a spot with your inking, you can put more ink on the press plate, put this back on top and run it through again. That gray magnetic surface on the Better Press system really holds a plate in place, so you can do multiple passes through so that you can really be happy with the results. So there, now you can see the ink transfer great and we have a good result. Now I will turn my press plate again on that Better Press system. So I just use my magnet to pick it up, and then I will turn it, and I will use the other shade of purple as I did before. Now there are inks intended for the Better Press. Spellbinders has Better Press inks, but I'm really finding that dye inks work great, and look at the beautiful results. So there is still a bit of an impression of that faux letterpress look, but you get that great transfer of ink. So I'll be using this background on my card today. All right, so far we've used press plates to do foiling. We've used press plates with the Better Press system to get a faux letterpress look. Now let's use press plates to get that deep impression. The best part about this particular technique is you just need a die cut machine and a flexible embossing mat, which most machines come with. All right, now I am using watercolor paper to make my impression. You can use any cardstock you want. I just find that watercolor paper is really good for this particular technique. I do like to mist that cardstock with just a little bit of water. I feel it helps to make a better impression, but you can also skip this if you want. Next, you need to set up your die cut machine plates to make an impression with a die. That'll be in your manufacturer's instructions for your machine. It always involves a flexible mat like the gray one that I have here. So I've set up my platform and plates with that flexible embossing mat on top. I will then place my watercolor paper onto it, and then the press plate, the same one I used before to foil, face down on that. So I have the sandwich that the manufacturer recommends for making an impression or embossing with a die, but instead of a die, I'm using a press plate. I'll run that through my die cut machine, and that press plate will really press deeply into your paper and leave an amazing result. It is even more impressed, I guess you can say, than an embossing folder can do. And look at that. It looks kind of like a pillowy or quilted look, and you could use either side of this. Now, something you can do to step this up is to use a brayer to apply ink over the raised surfaces. So in this case, the flower image is pressed down, so I'm applying ink around it on the background. You could drag an ink pad over it if you wanted to. This is just another way to use an impression like this. You can also flip this over and apply ink to the raised floral image. So many different ways you can use this front and back, and it's really a great way to stretch your press plates. By the way, you can also do this with foil plates if you have them, but press plates seem to work really well. So now that I've demonstrated how to make an impression with a press plate, let's go ahead and create the element for my card. I have watercolor paper here that I've cut into an oval that will be at the center of our card. I'm setting up my die cut machine to make an impression with a die, but we're going to be using a press plate instead. Now, I thought it'd be fun to first ink up my press plate before making the impression. So I have that lilac ink that I'm just inking on top of the press plate. I want to kind of hold it there with a bone folder just so I can make sure I really ink this well. I like to dab the ink on and kind of twist a little bit to really get good coverage. I will then carefully pick this up and lay it face down onto my watercolor oval, then put the other plate on top and run it through. So on the demonstration I just did, I didn't ink up the press plate, and it gives just that deep impression. This time I inked up the press plate first so that it'll leave that color in the impression and allow it to stand out more. I did use a light color of ink so that it will be subtle. You could definitely use a darker color if you prefer. And remember, you can always use the other side where the image is raised. I love having both options. So I finished this card up off screen because it's very simple. I created a slightly bigger purple oval to put behind our white oval just so it stands out more. And I added that to the plaid background that we created with the Better Press system earlier. You can see the results of that background there. I added all of that onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. I added a sentiment from the Happy Vibes stamp set as I did on the last card. And I added some glitter drops from Pinkfresh Studio just for a little bit of sparkle. So you can see that you can make a very deep impression with a press plate by using your die cut machine and that flexible embossing mat. Okay, I have another example for you, and this one I use press plates to make an impression, like I just showed you, and also with the Better Press system, but we're going to step things up a little bit. I'll start with the plaid background, but actually what you're seeing me do here is something that I messed up, but it gives a cool technique, so I'm including it, and then I'll switch to creating the plaid. So here I've inked up the diagonal press plate with a blue ink. I'm running it through my die cut machine to create that faux letterpress look. And you can see beautiful ink transfer there. Now I forgot to rotate my plate. So instead, I am inking it up with Slumber ink. This is like a blue color that's just beautiful. And I put the the clear plate on top, but I had rotated it. And I'm running through again. And because I didn't turn my diagonal plate, I end up getting more stripes in the same direction instead of crisscross, but I like it too. So keep in mind, you could really build a beautiful colored background with that diagonal plate without even rotating it. Now that was a mess up. That's not what I wanted to use on this card. Instead, I wanted to use a light blue cardstock and make sure to rotate my plate between. So I have a light blue cardstock here. I have inked up my plate with that Slumber blue ink. I'll run it through and there we have our first set of stripes. Now I will rotate that press plate on my Better Press. So I just rotated it one turn. And I will ink this up with a different shade of blue. This is Waterfall, which is, by the way, my favorite color from Pinkfresh Studio. It is just a beautiful bluish teal color. I'll put the clear plate on top, run that through, and now we have our plaid forming. So this is similar to the plaid that I did earlier in the purple colors, but I'm going to step this up now. This time, I am using the regular stripe press plate that's new from Pinkfresh Studio. This can also be done to create a plaid in the same way, but I'm combining it with the diagonal, so we're doing all of it. So I have it on my Better Press system here. I'm inking it up with mint ink. I'll put that same paper on top, run it through, and you can see now we have some vertical stripes on the background. Then I will rotate that plate one turn and ink it up again, this time with Ocean Breeze. Run that through, and now we have a really fun plaid background. So we did 4 passes through the die cut machine with our Better Press, each time with different stripes in different directions. So it's fun that you can combine different plates together. Look at that gorgeous result. I feel like results like this is what makes me really excited about these type of press plates and why it's my new favorite type of product. Okay, so next up we need a floral image for the front. I'm using this Amazing Things collection from Pinkfresh. Now in this collection, once again, there is a stamp set, there's a press plate set, there are coordinating dies, and there are layering stencils all sold separately so you can pick and choose. The cool thing about the press plate set for this one is you've got the floral press plate, but also 2 sentiments. There's thank you and thinking of you. And the coordinating die works with those or with the stamped images in the stamp set. I really like that these are all really well thought out so you can use them in different ways. I will be using the floral press plate in a traditional way and the layering stencils to color it in and the die to cut it out. Okay, so I have regular white cardstock here. You could use cotton cardstock for the Better Press, but I'm using regular white this time. I'm temporarily adhering it to the center of our clear plate, and I'm inking up my press plate using black pigment ink. You can use absolutely any black dye or pigment ink you may have. Now, if you worry about getting that gray platform inky, you could always take a very thin piece of clear plastic, like from some packaging, and put it in between the press plate and that gray platform, and then you won't get that platform inky, but I'm not scared of a little ink. So I've inked that up with black. I'll put the clear plate on top, run that through our die cut machine, and this will give us a very fine, detailed, impressed image. The impression is subtle when you do this faux letterpress technique, but look at that detail. I'm crazy about the detail. It's much more crisp than you would get with a stamp. So I use the coordinating die to cut that out, and now I'm using the layering stencils to color it in. I'm not going to show all of the inking because it's very straightforward. I just line up the stencil and add the color. Now I will say I like to do my die cutting before the stencils because that way my grip mat here, my sticky mat, will hold that stencil in place with the die cut underneath, and I can be sure it won't shift. But if you prefer, you could first stencil and then die cut. I also like to die cut first because I'm more likely to mess up the die cutting than I am with the stenciling. So if I do the die cutting first, I know I've got a good die cut, then I can add the color. By the way, I was wrong. The cardstock I used here is that cotton paper from Spellbinders that's meant for the Better Press. And I realize that now because when you ink on that cotton paper, it has a little textury look to it, which I think is beautiful. But if you want a smoother look, you could use a smoother cardstock. Okay, now let's do another example of making a deep impression with the die cut machine, and that's on that white hexagon in the background. It's hard to see in the photo, but you'll see the impression in a moment. So I have my die cut machine set up to make an impression with the die using that flexible mat, but instead I'm going to use a press plate. So I die cut some watercolor paper using a hexagon die from Pinkfresh Studio, and I am taping that die cut onto my stripe press plate. I'm taping it there because I want to make sure the stripes are straight going across it. I'll then put that on that flexible mat, run it through my die cut machine, and now you can see I have deep stripes impressed into my watercolor paper. Love the look of that. Again, hard to see in the video or on the final card, but in real life, it's great texture. So I'll add that white hexagon die cut to the center of my background, and then we have our flower die cut on top. Again, that flower die cut was created with the Better Press system and Stencils. I did add another sentiment to the center, once again from the Happy Vibes stamp set that I showed you earlier. And all of this is on an A2 note card, which is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Here you can see the beautiful background we got by doing the faux letterpress with the Better Press system and doing the 4 different colors with the different stripes. And you can also see the impression we made with the same plate on that white hexagon. Also, we have that fine detail image of the floral and the stamp sentiment on top. So on this blue card, we used our press plates in 2 ways, one with a Better Press system and one with our die cut machine to make that deep impression. Okay, let's move on to a little bonus card I did here. I actually created that bright plaid background exactly how I did the blue one. I just used white cardstock and bright colors of inks. So I'm not going to show the whole process, but I used the 2 striped press plates and the 2 different orientations to create another plaid background. Now, I thought this was super bright, and I wasn't going to use it because it was too bright for the card I had planned, which is the one I just showed you. But I decided to not let it go to waste and just create a little bonus card here. I really liked the result. It was just so bright, I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I created a simple card and went for this kind of bright vibe feel to it. Now for the background, I also used the older Pinkfresh Floral backdrop die. This is a much older one that I use quite often. You run it through your die cut machine as you would a regular die, but instead of cutting, it creates this fun pierced pattern. I will use this on the top of my card and the plaid on the bottom of my card. So I'm covering the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. I'm covering it with adhesive. I'm putting my plaid kind of diagonally there on the bottom. I wanted to have enough hanging off the bottom that I could save the leftover piece for later. Then I'm putting our textured pierced piece at the top, so it looks like it's on the whole background. I'll flip that over and cut off the excess, and these extra pieces I can definitely use on another card. I noticed that the tape runner wasn't really holding that pierced white cardstock piece because it has texture on the back, so I'm removing it and adding some liquid adhesive that I know will hold it well. After I place that on the top, I will take a thin strip of black cardstock, this is just a scrap I had, and put it right across where the 2 pieces meet, so it has kind of a nice finished look. I also feel like this black will draw my eye in towards the sentiment, which will be placed on the top in a moment. I also have my solid foiled floral piece that I created with the leftover foil earlier in this video. I glued 2 extra white die cuts to the back of that, and now I'll glue that onto the card. I'm using liquid adhesive because I'm not really sure where I want it to be, so I can kind of move it around until I'm happy. Then I can add the Sending Happy Vibes sentiment on top of that. I thought the Happy Vibes kind of went well with the kind of bright vibe that I have going on in this card. So now in the video, that foil looks like it's colored, but it's really gold with some iridescent shine, which picks up the colors of the plaid there on the bottom. And you can see on this card, we use press plates to create that plaid background and to create the foil image that I had that leftover foil for. All right, now on to my last card, which I think was my favorite of the bunch. Now for this one, we'll be using press plates for foiling because I really want to demonstrate that they foil very well. So I have the 2 stripe press plates, and I have 2 colors of foil here. I have the Aura and I have Prism. Both of these I find to be very good at foiling. It's best for foolproof foiling. If you want to try a good foil, these are the ones that I recommend. They're gold and silver, but they have that iridescent shine to them, which makes it even more sparkly. If you want something not as shiny, I recommend the gold matte. I think that's a beautiful foil too, and it foils well. Now I have my diagonal press plate here on my warmed up Glimmer machine. I put the prism, the silver one, face down on it, and then I'll put a piece of cardstock on top of that. This time I chose to use that super smooth white hammer mill cardstock. I'll press the timer. When the button's done, I'll take all of those plates out and run it through my die cut machine, which will apply that pressure that transfers that foil onto the cardstock. And you'll see we get beautiful results. So you can foil with foil plates, but I'm finding you can foil even better with press plates. Now I'll rotate that plate just one turn so the stripes are going in a different direction. This time I'll take that gold foil, the Aura foil, and lay that down face down onto the press plate. Then put my same foiled piece back on top of it. So we're going to do foil on top of foil, which is totally works great. You'll get a beautiful plaid in the end. So I'll lay that face down, making sure I didn't rotate my cardstock. Put the plates on top, push the timer button. When the timer's done, I'll take it all out and run it through my die cut machine to apply that pressure. And now we have a plaid foiled background. It's absolutely beautiful. You could use colors of foil for this, but I did the silver and gold, and I'm going to apply some ink blending on top of it. I'm just crazy about this look. So we did this earlier with the Better Press system for a colorful faux letterpress look, but now we have it with foiling. I'll be using the new Pinkfresh Joyful Day collection here. There are the Better Press plates there at the top. There are 2 sentiments and then the leaves. There's also a stamp set, coordinating dies, and the layering stencil. I really like these leaves because they can be used as kind of fillers for any floral images you have, or you could use the leaves alone. You'll definitely be seeing me use these in future videos. All right, so I will be using the press plate to do foiling of these leaves, and I will do both gold and silver foil on white smooth hammer mill cardstock. I really feel it's important to note that today I've demonstrated that you can use press plates on the Glimmer machine to do foil, but do not try to use foil plates on your Better Press system. Spellbinders advises against that. I have been experimenting with it. I'll talk about that in the future, but for now it's best to not use your foil plates on your Better Press system. All right, so after I did the foiling of leaves in both silver and gold, so I did 2 pieces, I'm lining up my stencils and inking them. Now, I'm not going to show all of this because this is super simple stenciling, but the technique that I used here to color is I put down over the stencil a light color. So here I'm using a very light limoncello color. Then I'm coming in with a darker color from that same family. This is Spanish moss. And I'm putting some of that darker color at the base of these leaves. Now I am not taking time to blend. You don't need to with these inks. It'll smooth out and look great on its own. So the idea here is many companies like Pinkfresh have ink families. So there's a light, medium, dark, and extra dark of the same color. So I'm using the light to color in the whole leaf, and then the darkest color from that collection just to put that dark color at the base of the leaf. And it really creates some fun contrast and makes the leaves look dimensional. So don't be afraid to put light and dark together, let them blend together, and go for that high contrast. So there I did waterfall lightly over all of the leaf. Now I'm coming in with the darker paradise and putting that just at the base of the leaves. The result is gorgeous. So I used greens and blues to create these leaves. I think blues are fun to use on leaves now and then. Once I'm done, I can use the coordinating die to cut all of those out, and it creates a few leaf pieces from each set. Next, I'm using one of my favorite die sets from Pinkfresh, which is the Notched Corner Frame die set. This has dies that cut frame shapes, but then also dies that do kind of a piercing pattern, and you can use them together or separately. So what I'm using is a small frame die along with that detailed faux kind of pin or stitching look. and placing that right in the center of a 4¼ by 5½ inch white piece. So this will cut out the center and then also leave those little notch line details. Through that opening, I wanted to show my plaid background, but I thought it'd be good to add some color. I didn't use color cardstock, A, because white cardstock's cheaper and really foils beautifully, and B, I wasn't sure what color I wanted in the background. I decided to use turquoise and apply that ink over the foiling. You can just buff the extra ink off of the foiling with a dry cloth. And now I have that beautiful blue inked background with the foil, and this will match the inking we did on the stenciled leaves. All right, so I did use foam tape around the back edge of my frame, and I'll place that piece on top of our blue foiled plaid piece, and then place that all on top of a white note card. Now, I did trim down my frame, so it's 4 by 5¼ inches, and the note card that I'm using is slightly bigger at 4¼ by 5½. I have liquid adhesive on the back of my leaves, and I'm just kind of deciding where to put these. I put some leaves coming up the bottom corner and then some leaves going from the opposite corner. I did die cut an additional white leaf die cut that's already glued to the back of our stenciled ones because I want them to be stronger. You can see some of them are hanging there in the middle. I didn't want that to get crushed in the mail. So by adding an extra die cut to the back, you get a little dimension and you get strength. Once I have all my leaves glued in place and let them dry for a little bit, I will flip it over and trim off the excess. I will again use that trick of kind of stabbing the side of a foam piece with my craft knife to pick it up and tuck it under some of those leaf die cuts. This will just give some dimension there in the middle, so it kind of looks like it's floating above the blue background, and also it helps those leaves to stand out against that blue foiled background. For sentiment, I use the Pinkfresh Garden Bouquet stamp set. Now, this is one of those sets that's a part of a collection where there's a coordinating die set, there are coordinating stencils, and there's coordinating washi tape, which is super awesome. I encourage you to check out my last video. I'll link it up here on the top right and in the description below if you want to learn about washi tape. However, I couldn't find the washi tape to show you today. I just used the sentiment on this card. So I stamped the sentiment, "You are all kinds of wonderful," with black ink on white cardstock and die cut that out and added it to our background. Love that sentiment. Here I have 3 pieces of gold string that I'm tying in a bow together. I want to make it look like this is tied around some of our leaves, but really I'm just gluing it onto some of the leaves. So I'm kind of pulling the different loops here until I'm happy with the bow that I have. I'll put a dot of strong liquid adhesive. This is Gina K Connect, and I'll place the knot right onto it. And I'm tucking it right under there at the bottom of Wonderful, so it kind of pulls your eye there. It's kind of hard to see this thin gold thread in the video, but it really adds a lot to it in real life. Once that's dry, I can come back and cut off those extra ends, allowing them to kind of stick off the card here and there. So I left this card as is. I didn't add any gems or bling because we have the shine and the plaid on the background and the fine shine on those leaves. You can also see my gold bow there. And this was a fun one because I used my press plates for foiling alone. You could definitely do the same card without the shine by just using the press plates with your better press system and either black or colored ink. I really like the overall design of this, and I plan to make more, but make some in different colors, even creating some pink and orange flower or leaves. I think it's fun to kind of change things up once in a while and not do all of our leaves in plain old green. Now, before we go, I did want to mention that free gift offer. Right now, when this video comes out, Pinkfresh Studios is offering this press plate. It's a birthday Make-A-Wish press plate. This is free for orders of $50 or more. I have the information in my description below if you want to look into that. This is a great plate for doing any of the 3 techniques I talked about today. So I'll put that description below. It's a generous offer, so I thought I'd mention it here in the video. By the way, if you don't have any press plates, you can do some of these techniques with wafer thin dies. One you can do is the impression. Remember how I made an impression with a press plate on that purple card? You can do that with a die also. And you can also foil with dies. It'll give thin outline results, but it still is great. And I'll link to a video with that up here on the top right. As far as the Better Press, the only thing I recommend using on your Better Press system are press plates. So there you have it, a lot of ways to use my new favorite type of product, press plates. Here we talked about using them to make a faux letterpress look, to make a deep impression, and to foil. I really hope that this video is helpful to you as you learn more about this new type of product. I have everything I used linked in my description below. You can also check out the videos I have linked here for more ideas for using your press plates creatively. Thank you for watching this. I hope you have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.